This week, first up, it's the enterprise security news discussing how Tripwire unveils a new version of Tripwire Connect, infrastructure management at scale with Netshield, 5 trends shaping the future of container security, and some funding updates from BurstIQ and Kenna Security. In the second segment, we welcome Paul Claxton, COO and Managing Partner of Elite Holding, Valiant Consulting. And reciprocity, thank you, to talk about the top cyber threats for COOs, CMOs, and CISOs. In our final segment, we welcome Matt Wickhouse, co-founder and CEO at The Finite State, to talk about supply chain security in the era of IoT. Excuse me. Stay tuned for all that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Cloud-first development helps your business move fast, but misconfigurations and blind spots are part of the deal. App and dev teams get the flexibility, while security teams are left with the stress of managing new risk using legacy workflows. ExtraHop RevealX provides cloud-native network detection and response, backed by cloud-scale machine learning that helps you spot threats and unify processes across hybrid environments. Learn more at extrahop.com/securityweekly. That's extrahop.com/securityweekly. Networks are becoming increasingly complex and fragmented, and digital transformation and DevOps are driving an explosion in network connectivity changes. With each new network connection, cyber attackers may gain another opening to breach or traverse the network. At Tufin, they've pioneered a policy-based approach to network security management using automation and analytics. As a result, you can make network changes in minutes instead of days, reliably and securely. To learn more about Tufin, the security policy company, go to securityweekly.com/Tufin and sign up for a free evaluation. By the end of 2020, 99% of exploited vulnerabilities will be publicly disclosed and known to IT system admins. The consequences of that fact means the burglar will already be in your house because you left the front door wide open by failing to patch known vulnerabilities. How can you keep the threat actors out? Through cloud-based automation, Automox enables you to slam the door on unpatched OS and third-party vulnerabilities across your entire Windows, Mac, and Linux infrastructure. Take advantage of a free trial with Automox to not only see the vulnerability status of your infrastructure, but do something about it within minutes. Start automating the fundamentals of cyber hygiene at securityweekly.com/Automox. That's securityweekly.com/Automox.
Welcome to episode 156 of Enterprise Security Weekly for October 2nd, 2019. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, joined in studio by Mr. Matt Alderman, back again this week.
2 weeks in a row.
It's awesome. Security and Compliance Weekly, episode 1. It's
yes,
in the can.
Yesterday, in the can.
You'll see that at some point. Not right away. So
not right
hold
away.
Your breath, but it's we're working on it.
We're
working on it. On the lines remotely, Mr. John Strand is here with us. John, welcome.
This is weird. Like, we're all here.
We're all here, right?
Strange. Doesn't seem right.
Studio
It should be a good show, though.
Absolutely.
Because we got blockchain. We got blockchain.
Blockchain. Had to throw that blockchain story in there. Before we get to blockchain, Greathorn is our new sponsor. Email security, right? Do you know anything else about them at this point in time? I have not briefed with them in some time, so looking forward to hearing more and catching up with them.
To know each other.
Yes.
They are coming online as we speak.
Sweet. Also exciting news about our webcast program. We're partnered with ISC Squared as an official CPE provider. If you attend any of our webcasts, you get 1 CPE credit per webcast. You can register for upcoming webcasts with some of our sponsors, such as SaltStack, Preempt, ServiceNow, or Core Security. In all of them, you get some insights into the problem, the solution, and a little bit of specifics about that sponsor's solution with a Q&A at the end. So, I mean, there's no reason why you shouldn't be attending these webcasts. They're free.
CPE credits,
you
free.
register, you get a CPE credit, and you learn some stuff in general about security and some specific stuff about the vendor.
And you get some funny memes occasionally.
Occasionally funny memes. SecurityWeekly.com/webcast to register for the upcoming ones, and SecurityWeekly.com/on-demand for the archive. Alrighty. on to the security news. Where do you want to start? I think John wants to start with blockchain.
Oh,
Yeah, which one was that?
BurstIQ.
Was that BurstIQ?
Yeah.
They closed a funding round, and according to the article, they do apply blockchain technology essentially for healthcare.
Yes. So that means that they were successful in swindling someone out of $5.5 million. So congratulations to them and Elsewhere partners.
I feel like you're on the fence about this one.
Oh, God. No. So, look, if they would like to come on the show and discuss blockchain technology and how it can be implemented in healthcare, I would absolutely love to have that conversation with them. And the reason why I think it's important is whenever you're implementing blockchain on anything, you got to figure out what problem is it solving. Haha, Michael Santarcangelo, of course. But is it doing that better than a traditional database? And I think that that's where, especially whenever you're talking about medical records, it falls flat on its face, because there's engineers at Oracle and at Microsoft that have been working for decades to come up with reliability, scalability, security, all of those different things. And I have yet to see anybody that can say, yes, blockchain can do this problem better than a traditional technology. So that's my big concern. And I will go so far as to say I'm still fairly convinced. I haven't seen anything yet that's come up where blockchain can be adequately applied for much anything other than like currency. Whenever you're talking about database and transactions and things of that nature, it just doesn't work very well at all.
You know, that's interesting. Now I really want to get a database engineer or two across our shows to understand that, because I feel like it's something we haven't really talked about. I also feel like in security, it's something we take for granted. Like, yeah, there's databases and database people, and they do their thing. And I think occasionally, how often do you get deep into the database security, John, in your testing?
Oh, quite a bit, actually. Well, actually, no, that's kind of not true. A lot of times whenever we're breaking into databases, the vast majority of time is either a patch is missing, or it's simply a credential issue, or we're using something like curve roasting to pull service accounts and accessing the databases that way.
Yeah, it's kind of a lot of, I mean, it's just like the push to cloud and microservices. A lot of those lower layers are being extracted away. I mean, you still have to understand database design, but like even in the application that I'm coding in, there's an ORM that sits between the database, and I make calls to it, and it does a lot of it in the back. And I still have to do some basic engineering of deleting indexes and updating fields and things like that. But much of it's been abstracted away from development, right? Much of it's shifted to the UI and other things.
But it's weird because there's still issues that exist. Oh, yeah. So I would say this would have been a couple of years ago at BHIS. We were working on early iterations of Rita whenever we moved it to Mongo. And Mongo is running super, super, super slow, and it shouldn't. Mongo should be screaming. And when we got to looking at the code, they were actually doing insert statements one row at a time. And I'm like, well, there's your problem right there. Right. You can do bulk inserts are much faster on databases. So you still do need that database professional to be able to tune and optimize. It's just, I think, once again, this is like Matt and I were talking about it last show. As we get older, I think a lot of those skills are getting abstracted away to the point where the people that know what's going on are getting rarer and rarer.
Yeah.
Or you could run an abstracted metadata database in a SQL database and really kill your performance of a database. I have firsthand experience with that too.
And I think that joke applies to this blockchain issue, right? Whenever you're talking about putting medical records or something like that on the blockchain, what is it actually buying you? Or are you just adding in an extra layer of complexity onto it that is making it far more difficult to actually achieve the goals that you're looking for?
Yeah. Again, looking for those great use cases for blockchain. John, you don't think this is the one, so.
Actually, there are some really cool use cases. I know with Ethereum, you can develop in Solidity and you can come up with smart contracts. And the smart contracts, some really great applications I saw was CryptoKitties. It was a game via the Ethereum blockchain. You could buy and sell cats, kind of like Pokemon. I thought that was a fantastic application for that particular blockchain technology.
My children would love that, except for they wouldn't sell their cats. They'd just keep buying them, and I'd have them hanging out of my house.
But at least then you'd have Ethereum. That would be cool, too.
That's true.
Yeah, and keeping Ethereum was a good thing.
Yeah.
This interesting article, Infrastructure Management at Scale with Netshield. Not a lot of details here. I mean, automation of IoT sensors is such a broad term.
Right. It's another buzz term. We got blockchain today. We got IoT today.
And automation thrown in there as well. Yeah. And APIs.
We'll get some AI in here somewhere, I'm pretty sure.
The use of integrated API, database-based information can be pivoted between various databases, and information from events from different sources can be converged. I'm not sure where they're going with this.
So my concern on this, and we've been talking about it for a couple of months, and I think Extra Hop started talking about it last month, where you have remote access into your environment, or whether you're dealing with something like Nuance or you're dealing with something like TeamViewer. And the concern that I have with this is if you go down, it says benefits with remote access. That's not friends with benefits. That sounds like an STD that you would catch. So my concern is if you're implementing these for remote access to your IoT devices around your environment globally, is this another remote access point that is a way into your environment? Yeah. And if so, how are they actually going through and securing that? And to be completely honest, Netshield does have a pretty good security portfolio. So I'm hopeful that they do have some good security layers in this as well.
Yeah, there's just so many different types of IoT devices.
Oh, right.
And, increasingly, I was doing some investigating at home because I was upgrading my IoT smart home at home. A lot of these devices have not just an API that you can talk to the cloud and interface with, but locally on the device, they have APIs. Jesse was presenting last week. He heads the Cyber Patriot team and works for Compass, and was just showing how you can basically just abuse all of these open APIs on all of these IoT systems. Now, it requires you're on the local network.
Right.
Many of them don't require authentication for certain calls. I read an article, it was like 2 years old, and I tried some of the requests, and they were failing, saying I needed authorization. But then I'm like, what is that? What is that authorization? IoT likes to make everything easy and seamless, so I bet you there's something there.
A lot of calls without authentication.
Yeah, and so that's independent of maybe some other management protocols and independent of the security of the operating system and all of those things. It's just like another way into all of these devices.
This announcement reminds me of taking a traditional network approach and building a solution to try to manage IoT, because everybody wants to try to tap into that market. But is it really the right approach, or do we have to rethink a better way to solve that problem in IoT because of all these weird issues with IoT?
And I also think that we haven't defined the problem of IoT. Whenever we had the DDoS attack against Dyn a while ago, everyone was like, oh, that's an IoT problem. And we set up, there's all kinds of companies that came up with solutions to try to solve the IoT problem. But none of them actually solved the issue that brought down Dyn. What brought down Dyn is a whole bunch of unmanaged IoT devices with default passwords on the internet. And a lot of the solutions that you buy don't actually solve that. So I really do like any vendors that do have that passive sort of inventory of devices on a network. So it's easier for you to identify those IoT devices, because I think the problem is unmanaged and unknown IoT for many companies, far more than just standard IoT that they are monitoring.
Yeah. Versus a centralized solution to, provide a gateway to them, right? Visibility is the first problem.
Well, that's what I wanted to do at home. I'm like, well, if I want to talk to these devices, and they talk to each other over, make API calls, like when your Philips Hue talks to your Google Home.
Yeah, and they're doing it over Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and some of the other protocols that you may not even be monitoring on your network anyways.
So I'm like, maybe we need an API gateway for home or something. But then you extrapolate this problem out to enterprises, infrastructure, critical control, those kind of things. So that's interesting.
But even if you get to that, before you even get to that point, you got to have proper segmentation and isolation. And I think that that's a big part of the conversation that's being missed in a lot of this too.
Yep, absolutely.
Yes. There's a couple duds in here. So the Centrify article. So I don't understand. I don't understand the purpose of this article. Centrify to highlight the role of zero trust privilege access management in cloud security at Gitex 2019. So it's basically an article that says we're going to Dubai, we're going to go participate in Gitex 2019, but there is no news in here. There's no new announcements, no new product enhancements, nothing. It's a long article that says, hey, we're coming to Dubai, check us out.
Yeah.
I'm like, really? That's press-worthy?
But look,
I was hoping there would be a product announcement somewhere.
No, I went through the whole thing. I couldn't find it.
Whoever's running press for Centrify, awesome job, though. Well played.
Got us talking about it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about it. It's in the news, so that's well done from a marketing perspective. And the other thing that I think sucks about this is last week we were talking a lot about zero trust, and how I do think it is an important concept that organizations need to start looking into. So this is just basically a wasted opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's all.
I mean, I love what Centrify is doing. I love their identity solutions. We know identity is kind of that next frontier of what we need to protect. I was just hoping for some meat in the article other than we're flying everybody to Dubai to hang out for a couple days at Gitex. But anyways.
And what I thought was a good angle on this article is that they say it's designed to handle requests. They're not only humans, but also machines, services, and APIs. And I think if you're going to throw these buzz terms around and attempt to solve a problem in the identity space, you can't just be about the users. You have to talk about machines, services, and APIs, which can be three completely different things that are essentially how everything. I mean, I talked about my home. The applications that we're deploying today are the same thing. There's all these pieces and parts and different services and different APIs that need to talk to each other. And who's to say who is authorized to talk to whom and when and how, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yep. And that seems to be what we take advantage of as penetration testers and attackers, right? Is those trust related? Well, I mean, it comes back to like way back in the day when we had like our login, right? We were just exploiting trust between systems. Now those systems are maybe 10 times more little parts spread out, and the problem is just multiplied by 10.
It's multiplied, yeah.
The
machine accounts and all the service accounts, everything that has to be managed.
Agreed. Complexity issues for sure.
Tripwire unveils new version of Tripwire Connect.
So it's a new version. They had this before. It's like a management platform for their
it's all their products.
Configuration management, file integrity monitoring, and vulnerability management.
Correct.
But what sucks about this is they're not saying what it brings to the table new, like the new version. Because they're talking about the new version of Tripwire Connect provides these things. But I thought those were already things that Tripwire Connect did. So I don't see what the new version is actually doing, or is it because they now are offering a software as a service model, or has it always been that way?
Yeah, and that's the interesting part, right? Is, because Tripwire bought nCircle and the IP360 product
back in the day.
In the day, they had to integrate all this stuff together. So this existed in some form or fashion. This is a new version. Maybe it's a better UI and easier to use. I don't know. I can't tell. But you're right. It talks about both on-prem and SaaS, and I can't remember whether Tripwire had a SaaS offering or if this new version of Connect now gives them SaaS capability. It's not clear to me in this article if that's what the new Connect is now SaaS-enabled, because, as we all know, all the vulnerability management guys trying to figure out how to compete with Qualys in the cloud, so they're all trying to build their own SaaS versions off of their old on-prem solutions.
Right.
So I've got a question, a historical lesson for me, I'm hoping. What happened with Tripwire? Because if we're looking at like Carbon Black, we're looking at EDR solutions, it seems to me like this space, if you would have gone back 8-10 years ago, this would have been Tripwire's space to lose, because Tripwire was pretty much one of the bigger vendors in this area, had great mind share in the fact that it was an open source product and it switched over to commercial. And now all of a sudden we have like Carbon Black and CrowdStrike and Cylance and all these products. How in the hell did Tripwire actually lose that space? Whenever, like I said, it was absolutely their space to lose.
Can I tell you?
And hold on, space by space, you mean endpoint detection?
EDR specifically.
Yeah.
It's not even just detection, right? But even recording of what processes, network connections, and file changes, and all of that. That was Tripwire's bread and butter.
And then when they bought nCircle and brought in the IP360 product, both on the vulnerability configuration side, they had an advantage over all the VM vendors because they also had endpoint.
Yeah.
So here's what happened. So history is they got bought by Thoma Bravo, right? So Thoma Bravo brought them in as private equity investment. Thoma Bravo then spun them back out to Belkin, and I think you saw a de-emphasis on some of that core technology, John, that was really, really good, now buried under this industrial control Belkin environment. And I don't know if they get the same... if they have the same strategic direction or not. It looks like they made a lot of improvements in the early days after that acquisition to address some of the aspects of industrial control system, but then they weren't making the investments in the file integrity monitoring, the VM products they bought from nCircle, and companies literally started ripping them out. And this happened about 3 or 4 years ago, John. Because when we were at Tenable, we were going in replacing the old IP360 product, at a ton of accounts when we were at Tenable, just because there wasn't that investment. And so I think a lot of it had to do with the whole shift from a standalone private company to private equity gets rolled into a bigger company like Belkin, and you lost strategic focus and vision, and the product just died.
We talked about that on BSW on Monday.
Yep. And I think I want to talk about this as it relates to Anomaly, which is another one of our stories, because Tripwire was that file integrity monitoring. They were that system integrity monitoring. And I almost wonder if that purchasing of IP360 was the beginning of the dilution of what their product actually was. So you basically branch out to the point where you're doing too much, you have too many offerings, and it just confuses your customers.
I think to your point, John, they made the wrong pivot. They tried to pivot into vulnerability management and configuration management when they should have taken what they had, which was file integrity monitoring, and just built an EDR product.
They already had a kernel driver to do FIM. They could have They could have done what Carbon Black and CrowdStrike and all these other guys did, but they pivoted the other direction.
Yep.
Well, and even, we talk about Carbon Black and CrowdStrike, but you could even take one step further and look at Tanium. I mean, they were absolutely, as far as like an inventory of software and services and things like that, they were in that position, and Tanium came and knocked them off. And I don't know. I think that should almost be a type case for people that are starting up companies that are getting like mid-level success and figuring out how they're going to pivot. This would be a good case for, like, this doesn't look like it went as well as it should.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, don't pivot into the older technologies. Pivot into some of the new leading edge stuff. I think that's part of the story there.
Yeah.
So you want to dig into Anomaly, John, I think, right?
Yeah.
A lot to dig into in here.
So I hate threat intelligence feeds, but I do like the way Anomaly ties a lot of that together in doing the baselining and looking for deviations in the norm. I absolutely love the fact that anytime I sit through an Anomaly presentation or I read something on Anomaly, they actually talk about the algorithms and how they use them. And just really, really, really happy with the way Anomaly kind of speaks to my inner geek, right? And that's honest to God true, right? And as we all know, I hate threat intelligence feeds with a passion, but the way that they actually tie it together, I think does a good job with it insofar as their partnerships. The problem I have with Anomaly is they're starting to go down that realm, like we talked about with Tripwire, and IBM kind of did the same thing, where they have Anomaly Lens, and then they have Anomaly Match, and then they have Anomaly Threat Stream, and then they have, it's kind of like, what the hell is Anomaly? It's now breaking up into a whole bunch of different separate products. And I really think that it hurts your product. I think it's easy for somebody from an investment perspective to say, we can spin this off as another product. We can now make more money. But I think it actually dilutes the message of your brand, dilutes the message of what your product does. And I think it ultimately hurts you in the long run. But I could absolutely be wrong. But I see tons of companies that do this like shattering of their product line. And it doesn't seem to work out all that well in the long run. I mean, look at any of the large vendors in this space. And they tend to have a very, very, very focused business line as far as what they do, and then they do it very, very, very well.
Because I think what you're getting to, John, is that the value is all three products working together.
Yes.
And so if you break up your product into three separate things, you're diluting the value of the entire thing.
These aren't products, they're features.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so
exactly.
Big difference.
Right. So you take something like ThreatStream, which is a threat intelligence platform, you're like, okay. There's a lot of threat intelligence platforms out there where you get the real values with Match and Lens sitting on top of it. Right. But why are you selling it as three different pieces? Why don't you just sell it as the whole?
It's one product with three features.
Right.
Yeah. Reading the descriptions, you get that, right? Because Lens does the web-based content, scans and identifies threats within, your basically, it looks like HTTP streams and logs, right? And then Match does the analysis to take maybe that and other threat feed data and correlate it with your vulnerability assets and logs, and then ThreatStream brings in all of that intelligence.
So the way you should really articulate this is you've got all these great threat streams, right?
Yeah.
And ThreatStream. It goes into this really cool matching engine that does machine learning. They do get into some of their discussions about what they're doing. Yep. And then they visualize that through Lens. That's just a standard kind of like architecture, not three different products.
And for me, this kind of gets to, I think that this also highlights, if you look at Anomaly ThreatStream by itself, that's garbage. If you're just buying threat intelligence, what the hell are you doing with it?
Right, you got to do something with it.
the other two products are showing you.
Let you do something with it. Yeah.
How do we actually tie this into actually being beneficial to an organization?
Right.
So call up your Anomaly sales representative and complain and say that it should all be one product. And we'd love to have them come on the show and talk to us.
So talking about that a little bit, because I think that ties into the logarithm article that I pulled. I don't think it's in the feed. Paul had an error, but logarithm releases true unlimited data plan for the SIM. So they announced this week they're actually going to have unlimited data plans to ingest more data into that SIM to get more of that value around correlations and the other things that you can get out of the logarithm platform. And so you're seeing the shift also of some of these vendors also going, look, if we have these data plans in place, does that limit how much contextual data we can bring in to do some of these more advanced correlations?
And how much of that is a response to Chronicle Backstory?
Oh, I think everybody has to do this, right? I mean, This is how Splunk's made their money for years, is charging for data, right? And everybody's like, oh my gosh, that Splunk, just the more stuff I add, the more I have to pay. You got Chronicle Backstory, obviously changing the game a little bit on the SIM, and other vendors really trying to figure out how you can continue to compete with more and more data, more and more correlations, driving more and more value, hopefully, into the SOC. But yeah, everybody's trying to figure out how to position against Splunk. We see Palo Alto moving into this space as well, so it'll be interesting how this changes Palo Alto strategy a little bit too.
Yep, absolutely.
I wanted to cover this 5 trends of container security. I think it's really just 2 from this.
Oh yeah.
I was thinking this is a bit there. Yes, go ahead.
I think it's 2. I think it's numbers 4 and 5 in the article in the show notes. First, container security is shifting both left and right. I'd argue if you want container security, you need to put it in
left and right.
So essentially that means before you're building that container, making sure that you're validating all of the components that make up your container in terms of vulnerabilities and configuration. Then as you push it right, making sure that it gets scanned once it's built, right? And then when you put it wherever you're going to put it, making sure there's some runtime stuff inside your container in order to secure it. I think containers give you the ability to do those things. Those are things we should do, regardless of what containers or not. Containers make it easier to do that.
I have a beautiful workflow in one of my presentations that talks about that whole piece you just talked about. How do you do it from the very beginning of the build process all the way to the runtime side? And when you do it right, you've shifted left and right, and you're bringing data that's valid not only to the security teams, but to the development teams and the operational teams.
Absolutely.
And that's how you have to do it. So I agree with you on that one.
And then this is containers are facilitating and fueling the shift to cloud 2.0.
Right.
Ignore the buzzwords for a moment. Yeah. If you do step 4 in this article that Matt and I just talked about, and make sure you have a solid process for building a reliable, secure container that, again, as Matt said, both functional and secure for your developers and such, then the possibilities, I don't want to say the possibilities are endless because it's kind of cliche, right? But then once it's containerized, you can go put that on-premise. You can put that in cloud providers.
You can put it. So I think the definition of Cloud 2.0.
I don't know. Anywhere is kind of a.
You can. You pretty much can.
Yeah.
I think. Are we at Cloud 2.0? I mean,
I don't. Yeah, that's a buzzword.
So here's how I define Cloud 2.0, right? I think Cloud 1.0 was infrastructure as a service, the lift and shift of the data center into infrastructure as a service, where I basically took my server and now I'm running it as an EC2 dedicated instance. That to me was really Cloud 1.0, that kind of data center to infrastructure as a service. If you think about where cloud is now and this concept of 2.0, it's not necessarily about dedicated infrastructure as a service anymore. It's now about leveraging all these great platforms, function as a service, et cetera, that the cloud providers have built that are abstracting away network and endpoint layers, right? And when you think about containerization and you think about what Amazon has done with ECS, EKS, Fargate, et cetera, that is a reality where if you're developing and putting your code into containers, you can literally drop it into Fargate and not have to worry about any underlying infrastructure. That's a really cool concept. And that's the way I would define Cloud 2.0 is the shift away from dedicated infrastructure as a service into these platform, function, container, orchestration as a service kind of
But I think
offerings.
it's important in this shift to containers, if you will, that you break it up into its functional components, and you can have as many of those as you want. I think you do kind of reach a point of diminishing returns. However, as you move it into the cloud, some of those could be containers that take advantage of services that are in the cloud. Some of them, maybe you don't even need the container anymore. You're just going to run it in a service in the cloud.
As a function.
I don't need a container to hold my database anymore.
Yeah.
I'm just going to use RDS,
Exactly right.
like stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I thought the last 2 points in this article were good.
I'm not a big fan of the whole security service mesh thing. I mean, you go to a Kubernetes, you go to KubeCon, it's all about service mesh and security mesh and the service mesh, and it's like, yeah, okay, whatever.
And point 2 was security policy is code. I mean, if you're in containers,
you're already there.
Your policy
you're fully
is
there.
Code, right?
Absolutely there
and
already.
Then,
it's not becoming reality. It is reality. You're defining all this stuff as code.
I think that it is reality, but some of you may not know it yet.
Yes, agreed.
Right. That's true. That is true.
Now, the first point was attacks against container infrastructures are accelerating. Of course.
Of course.
If that's where we're putting our applications, that's where people are going to attack them.
Right. And it's not just containers in general. I think it's the application as a whole.
Yes.
And it just happens to be that a lot of applications are moving to containerized based applications. It's not necessarily just container specific. I think it's the whole application architecture is where the attacks are moving to, because that's the new frontier, because all these things are hosted in various places.
Yep.
We got to cover this Kenna Security article.
Oh, yeah, and Kenna Security.
Yeah, Kenna announced a $48 million Series D funding round, added Sorensen Capital and City Ventures, Ken Elephant from Sorensen, who's done a lot of investments in this space. I think this is fantastic news for Kenna, because their growth is, to me, a true indication of the future of vulnerability management. It's not about just scanning for vulnerabilities and providing a report. What Kenna does that sits on top of this data, not only is it the integration of vulnerabilities from multiple sources, which I think is something that organizations struggle with all the time. We go back to the Tripwire Connect discussion, right? They have to figure out how to bring their FIM data and their vulnerability configuration data together. That's assuming you're only running Tripwire. What if I'm running Tripwire and Qualys and Veracode and this, that, and the other thing, right? So the ability to bring all that data together and then add the intelligence on top of understanding business criticality, understanding the threat intelligence feeds that are out there and where potential exploits are, and really doing what I would consider true prioritization at scale is a trend we're going to continue to see. These guys have done a lot of work in doing that. I don't know what the numbers are now, but at one point, I think something like 65% of Qualys' customers also had Kenna because it was pulling all that data together, integrating other data, and really providing that prioritization on top. Great investment for these guys to continue to grow.
It's interesting. I'd be curious how much you could accomplish with a Kenna solution without scanning, the scanning component, right? I mean, could you reach into your patch management system and get telemetry about what's patched and what's not? Could you reach into your configuration management platform that's not from one of the big 3 vulnerability management vendors, like Salt for security, for example? Right? So for those, could you reach into the cloud and just bring it all into Kenna? Like, why today? And it's interesting that I used to work for Tenable, right? You're saying, like, do we really need to scan? If we're building containers, right? I know what's going in the containers.
So if I weren't here, I'd be at Kenna.
Yeah.
Right? Just so everybody knows, that was one of the other opportunities as you and I were having conversations about coming over to Security Weekly. I've known Ed Bellis for years. I mean, he was a customer at Qualys. Karim, the CEO, is fantastic. And we've had some of those conversations, right? That if you had complete inventory of the box, roughly 80% of the vulnerability information you can infer from inventory by going to the NVD based on the version of the software you're running and know those. The only thing you can't do without a scanner easily, and we've had these conversations
find stuff
before.
You don't know about.
Well, not only that, it's the remote vulnerabilities, right?
Sure.
You'd still need an Nmap or something to scan from the outside to look for remote vulnerabilities. But all the local vulnerabilities, which is a good chunk of what the vuln scanners are doing, can be inferred directly from true inventory of all your OS and third-party versions. You already have that data. You wouldn't need a scanner to get that information. It's that other 20% or so that you'd probably need something external.
And also, if you're, I think you get a much more accurate picture if you have the inventory and you work from there. And you can still run a scan to find unknown devices or weird things that popped up. But yeah, if you have the inventory, that's a much better place to start for many organizations.
Absolutely.
The last article was the impact of recycling.
Yeah,
on industrial cybersecurity. Yeah, this was
operational technologies.
And I thought there were. I read something related to this article. I thought it was in a snippet or something, like about the attacks coming back. But this is
right. It's recycling existing malware code coming back to attack these environments. Now, this is a sponsored story from Indigi, who sits in the OT security space. So I think this article might be a little slanted.
Yep.
But there are some valid points here when it comes to operational technologies, industrial control systems, et cetera, that we don't have a lot of visibility into those networks. We do need to understand where the attack vectors are coming for, and we need a better way to manage it. You can debate what the best solution here is. I still think Dragos is one of the best in the space doing this, but this is very focused, I think, on some of the stuff that Indigi seen is part of seeing recycled malware attacks also impacting
and I mean,
ICS.
The elephant in the room is ransomware, right? And we've seen so many devastating ransomware attacks, and they quote RiskSense in here that released a report, and they say the top enterprise ransomware families use the same 15 vulnerabilities, and that should come as no shock to anyone, right? And I think we talked about Kenna and now RiskSense. I think messaging-wise, they're in a great position to say, we can help you bubble that stuff up to the top to help prevent against common ransomware. We all know they're probably using very similar techniques and easily exploitable kind of known vulnerabilities for the most part. I mean, and that's pure speculation over talking to many experts about what the attackers are actually using.
And part of the reason why is two things. One is we're connecting those ICS systems now where that malware can get into the environment.
Yep.
But you're also the controllers are older operating systems that are vulnerable to these types of attacks because they're supporting these different systems. They're not necessarily at the same patching level as an enterprise system because if they upgrade them, they potentially break all the controls that they're managing. So these management servers are typically older, unpatched, and therefore are ripe for these types of attacks that have worked elsewhere to work in that environment as well. So you tie those two things together, and that's why we see this big challenge in industrial control systems.
Yep. Cool. Well, we're a little over time, so thank you both for this segment. With that, we'll take a short break, come back with our interview, so stay tuned.